Good day. This is Herb Hess of CNE, Business Intelligence Specialists, and welcome to another Webi Wednesday. This Webi Wednesday is demonstration number 2. We call it Query Magic, Webi Formula and Query Magic. Let's get started, shall we? For the demonstration, we're going to see the following topics: the new Edit Query button, easy to design and edit and even run queries. We'll be able to run queries one by one or all at once in both query and report mode, and show you 2 formula magic techniques that will help building your reports off of your queries a lot easier as well. And afterwards we'll visit CNE.com for a special offer. I'm going to leave the slide for just a second so we can get right into Web Intelligence, and let me open up a pre-built report called Query Magic. One of the things you'll notice first is, to take advantage of this feature, we are in design mode. You can be in reading mode and read the report and interact with it, but for this to work we'll need to be in design mode. A new button has been added to make it easier to access the queries that you've constructed already. Here we have a report. The report is actually based on a prompt which asks us which states to retrieve store data on. And we can see the store names in the title. So let's look behind the scenes. Now normally, from whatever ribbon that I'm accessing at the top of the report designer, I would have to go back to data access in order to get to the edit button or to create a new query to retrieve new data. But in this case, I don't have to be on any particular ribbon. I can access the edit button, which allows me to edit the data provider or data providers. This takes me immediately to the query panel, and in this case I can actually see at the tabs below that we have both a revenue query and a margin query. So the revenue query brings back the year, the store name, and the sale revenue, and the margin query brings back the store name and the margin. So one of the things you'll notice now is that there's a refresh button, which has always been part of the query panel. But in version 4.0, the ability to refresh individual queries seemed to have gone away. That capability is now returned. So if you'll notice, if I don't click on the Run Queries button, which would run both queries simultaneously, I can click on the down arrow next to the Run Queries button and refresh either the revenue query or the margin query. Now, why is this helpful? This is helpful because you may have generated one query which was somewhat long running, and you may have subsequently added a second query using the Add Query button, and you don't necessarily want to refresh the first query and take up all that time and all that processing effort. So this method allows us to run queries individually, or perhaps some data has just been refreshed in one particular data source, but the other data is still valid. So I'm going to close out of the query panel and get back into the report mode. You'll notice that under data access, there's also an edit button here. There's a refresh button, and the refresh button allows me to do the same thing right from design mode, where I can refresh queries individually, such as the revenue query. In this case, the revenue query is prompting me for a variety of states. Or I could refresh the margin query, which does not have a prompt for various states as well. Very good. Next to the new edit button, there is a new refresh button, but you'll note that that new refresh button is a refresh all. It does not encompass the ability to select individual queries to refresh. Now let's look at the formula editor. You'll note that in our margin query, the result block shows that certain stores are considered flagship stores. Now, this flagship store column is not an object in the universe. It's an object that was created, and it's called a variable. And we have the variable right here. So if I were to right-click and edit the variable, or in this case now double-click to bring up the variable editor, we can see that it's a conditional statement using our formula language within Web Intelligence. The qualification around it is detail, which means that it's used for grouping, but not for drilling. And note that if the store name in the margin query is part of a list of stores, eFashion Austin, eFashion Dallas, eFashion New York Sundance, then the word flagship store should appear, otherwise an empty quote string should appear. Most of you who have Web Intelligence experience know that to build a formula or a variable such as this, we would have to manually type in the name of each of the stores. And there's the problem, that in many cases it's very easy to make a mistake or to omit an entry just because of the volume of typing involved. So what can we find out about constructing a variable or a formula that would allow us to overcome some of those difficulties involved in typing? I'm going to illustrate by creating a new variable or showing you how we created this variable here using one of the new techniques within Web Intelligence 4.1. I'll name it the same. I'm not going to actually save it, but I'll just call it flagship store, and I'll make it a detail associated with a particular dimension, in this case the dimension of store name in the margin query. And I'll bring this dialog up so I can click the OK button. Now, from our formula editor has improved substantially. First thing we need is a conditional statement, which happens to be in the miscellaneous function area, and it's the if function. So I'll double click on the if function, hit space, and then I'm going to evaluate the object store name from the margin query. So if the store name meets a certain qualification, and in this case the store name needs to be in a list. So I'm going to double click the in list operator, which already has a set of parentheses after it. The list operator is looking for a delimited set of values of store names. How would I specify the values? Well, this is where I typically would have to know a bit about Webi formula language, enter the square brackets, double quotes around the values, and so forth. But note in the operators area, if I scroll all the way up to the top of the operators area, there's now a new values feature. And I can double click to get the list of values of the selected object. So by double clicking values, I will actually see a list of store names. I can choose an individual store name, or I can multi-select using the control key, and then by clicking OK. In addition to the list of values, we need the result, which the variable is going to produce, flagship store, followed by an else clause indicating what would be produced if the store is not one of these values. So if I check that, then we have the new flagship store variable. It tells me a variable already exists by that name, so we're going to cancel out of this dialog right here. But isn't that great that you can choose the values, and as we'll see shortly, we can choose the prompt text as well. So the way the report title works here is that the report title references the user prompt, and in fact, if we were to refresh the first query, the revenue query, directly, we can see that the states that have been selected include California, Colorado, District of Columbia, New York, Texas. But if we were to remove those states and then choose other values, what's nice about this is that the context of the states that have been selected have been added to the title of the report. In other words, now I have Florida, New York, Massachusetts, for example. How did we do that? Well, in the report title, if I were to double click to bring up the formula editor, we can see that we have some literal text, revenue for stores in, plus the user response function. Now the user response function requires the prompt text associated with the particular prompt, in this case the state prompt. And in many cases what I have to do is go back and edit the query and get to the revenue query, which has a prompt, and go to the prompt properties and copy and paste this text. So it's a number of keystrokes which I may or may not remember to do properly. But in this case, what we can do actually with the title is to double click it and invoke the formula editor. The user response function is found after we use the concatenate operator, which is a plus symbol. User response is found under data providers. If I go to data provider, if I scroll down to user response, I want to be able to enter in the text of that prompt without having to now navigate out, somehow remember this text or copy and paste it into Notepad and edit the query and edit the prompt properties. So the prompt properties have been brought forward. If I double click on the prompt properties, you'll notice here is the prompt text, enter values for state. So I would simply select that value, click OK, and then the formula is accurate. And when I again check the formula, it showed me revenue for stores in Florida, New York, Massachusetts. So let's use our refresh feature one more time to refresh the revenue query. Let's remove these values one last time, refresh, and just add a different selection of states: Colorado, District of Columbia, and Texas, just to make sure that our formula is working properly. And we do see Colorado, District of Columbia, and Texas. And again, here's the user response function shown in the formula bar at the top of the report designer. So once again, we've concluded our Webi Wednesday. We're grateful that you've attended, and we'd like to invite you to learn more about web intelligence or any business objects or SAP technology by visiting CNE.com. We have a variety of training offerings which include public training, instructor-led training virtually, e-learning, subscriptions, e-academies, and the new Learning Hub as well. I'm going to minimize the report for just a moment so we can get back to our slides and tell you about our special offer. Our special offer is found at the URL below. In addition to registering for classes on Webi, which we have the new Webi 4.1 classes starting June 23rd and 24th, you can receive a ticket to the Phillies if you attend class. And if you can't make class and still like to attend the Phillies game, enter here for a chance to win a pair of Phillies tickets. No classroom attendance is required. So that's www.cne.com/Webi. And we look forward to a future Webi Wednesday with you, where we explore some exciting new topics in 4.1. Thanks very much, and talk to you soon. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to stop the recording now.